Do you want to know why you've not been able to quit lust and sexual immorality? There is one question that I guarantee you have never asked. If you were to ask this question and pursue the answer to it, it will change everything for you. And in over 12 years of talking about biblical sexuality and how to help people out of addictions to lust and pornography and sex and all these different things that people struggle with, I have never been asked this question even one time. And that's a really sad reality. The question is, what is the purpose of a sex drive? What is the purpose of it? Now, we all know that we have it. We all know we have a sex drive. We all know as Christians that sex is to be enjoyed in marriage, but what is the actual purpose of it? Because when you understand the purpose of a sex drive, you realize this is not just about having sexual experiences, but there is something way more profound about a sex drive than we were ever taught. So think about this. Why, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, are you given a sex drive? You go through puberty, all of a sudden your eyes are open and it's like, man, she's hot. He's hot, right? And you start noticing, and you start wanting, you start having these feelings inside your body. You start looking at your body parts and it's like, man, girls are growing. Guys, a part of their body is growing. And so what is the purpose of all of this? And why did God create things and create our body in such a way to experience this at that young age and then say, don't have sex until you're married? And I honestly believe that in this area of sexuality, on a subconscious level, most of us think that he's a God of torture more than a God of transformation. We have these desires, but we have no sexual outlet if we're single. We get married and we think, man, this is going to be awesome. And then it's not with having sex. And there's all these sexual issues we can encounter in marriage. This is all torturous unless we understand the purpose of our sexual desire. So what are the two main messages that we hear about sex in church, if a church would even talk about it? Typically, it's don't have sex till you're married and don't commit sexual sin. Don't watch pornography. There's two main messages that we hear about sex. And if there's another one, throw it in the comments. But I think that those are the two that mainly we hear in church circles. And both are about what not to do. Like, can you imagine if I got this camera lens in the mail and I look at it and I'm like, my entire pursuit and endeavor with this camera lens will be to not use it incorrectly. I don't want to use this incorrectly, but the whole time it's in front of me and I'm kind of throwing it in the air. I'm catching it, and maybe that's not the best thing to do. Oh man, I shouldn't catch it, or I shouldn't throw it anymore. And my whole pursuit is what not to do with this camera lens. But there's also this manual, this book of instructions that I have. And I just go, I don't think I'm going to read the manual. I'm just going to try to not use this in the wrong way. That's what most of us do with sexual desire. That's what most of the messages are about sexual desire. This is what is so important to understand, is that the purpose of a sexual desire goes way beyond simply having sexual experiences. And so if you think about it for you, what do you think that the purpose of your sex drive is? If there was one main purpose of a sex drive, what do you think it would be? Now, when I ask this at events, I typically get three answers: pleasure, reproduction, and intimacy in marriage. Maybe you have another purpose. And by the way, I think that there are a lot of purposes to our sexuality. But if there's one main purpose to a sex drive, we've got to understand what that is. And most of us have never even considered it. There's three categories of sexuality. If you were to look in the entire Bible, all the references and scriptures and verses about sexuality, you can categorize them into three different parts. So there's immorality, then there's sexual desires, and then there's sexual experiences in marriage. And so what a lot of us do when we think about the purpose for our sex drive, well, by the way, a lot of us don't think about the purpose for our sex drive. We just think that we need to not do the wrong thing, or we need to have sex in marriage, and that's about it. But when you think about the purpose of your sex drive, most of us label the purpose of our sex drive what is actually the fruit of the sexual experiences in marriage. And we have to see this in order to actually understand, why did God give us these desires when we were young and then say don't have sex until you're married? Well, the reason is because sexual desires is a different category than sexual experiences. So when we look at the purpose of sexual desires and we say that the three purposes typically are reproduction, intimacy in marriage, and pleasure, those three things are actually the fruit of sexual experiences, not the purpose of sexual desire. And so you're sitting there thinking, okay, you keep talking about the purpose. What is the purpose of sexual desire? In 1 Thessalonians 4, specifically in verses 3 to 6, it says, "For this is the will of God, your sanctification." So sanctification is like being set apart from the world, being different, becoming like Christ, not fitting into the way of the world. This is the will of God for you, is to be set apart, become Christ-like. "For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality." Okay, now we're getting into it. Because in the process of learning to abstain from sexual immorality, it actually sanctifies us and makes us look more like Christ when we do it in the Bible's way. So when we have worldly understandings about how to steward sexual desires, or we have a worldly understanding about the purpose of sex and the sex drive that we have, we don't understand the ultimate purpose that is to make us more like Jesus. And so what this is saying is, in the process of stewarding your sexual desires in a way that you abstain from the immorality, it's actually a sanctifying process, or it's a way that you become more like Christ. But then it goes on, because most of us, we stop there, right? That's the message of sex in the church. Don't do this, don't do that. And that's about where it ends. So for some of us, we might think, if I were to be free of porn, or if I were to stop masturbating, or if I were to be free of sexual sin, then my life would be good. And we make that the aim, but that should never be the aim. The aim is so much greater than that. And so we can't stop at abstain from sexual immorality. We have to continue on and see what more it says. "This is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his body in holiness and honor." Okay, fascinating. So now we have this picture that learning to abstain from sexual immorality sanctifies us. It sets us apart from the way of the world. So now we're different. We look more like Jesus in the way that we respond to sexual desires. And now we're not just stewarding our body to get a different dopamine hit. Some people will say, well, porn is a nervous system response, or porn use is like our brain screaming for dopamine. And while those things are true, if that was the ultimate, then the response to a temptation or to a desire could be to heal the nervous system, or it could be to have a healthy dopamine release in your brain. And so people see this and they're like, okay, well, I need to go have a cold shower. That produces dopamine. That will calm my nervous system. I need to go work out. I need to go do push-ups. I need to be in community, go do something fun. And all of these things will create a healthy dopamine response in our brain, and it will bring peace to our nervous systems. But none of those things are fully about Christ. All of those things you could do apart from Jesus. What this is saying is different. It's saying learn how to control your body in holiness and in honor. Both of those things are about Jesus. So now we're looking to Jesus and we're going, okay, Lord, what have you said about how to steward my body? Because if we learn to steward our body in a way that Christ has modeled, in a way that he is right at the center of our approach, now all of a sudden there's holiness and honor, and we're not simply relying on physical or worldly approaches. And then it goes on. It says, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. Okay, what's the differentiating factor here? Those who engage in lust don't know God. Those who steward their bodies in a holy and honorable way, we know God. And so you might be thinking, well, I do know God, and yet I go to lust. And so in your sexual area of your life, do you experience Jesus on a deep experiential way? Now, what I'm not saying is to have a sexual experience with the Lord. That is totally wrong, blasphemous probably, and we shouldn't even think that way. What I'm talking about is the other category, sexual desires. The desires reside in our hearts and they reside in our minds. Do you let the love of God, the presence of God, fill your mind and fill your heart when you experience sexual desire? Because when we do this, we actually learn to control our body in a way that's holy and honorable. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this so that you can really get a good grasp of what this looks like. So many of us, like me, we are led by the desires of our body. And when we're led by the desires of our body, or the desires of our flesh, to be more accurate, what happens is often we'll go into sexual immorality. Our soul then feels heavy because of the weight and the shame and the guilt that we carry. And spiritually, we often feel disconnected from God and from other people. So we're isolated. But when you have sexual desires and you're led by the Spirit rather than led by the flesh, now your sexual desires can actually be something where you're like, man, I'm feeling this. I have these desires. I want the experiences. God, how could you satisfy my heart right now? And when we realize like, man, I just want peace. I want love. I want affirmation. And we get that first from the Lord, Now, spiritually, we feel connected with the Lord. We're having a deep experience with the Lord, fulfilling our heart's desire for love or affection or respect or to feel desired or whatever is highlighted in our hearts by our sexual desire. We desire something sexually, and so we look in our hearts and go, God, how could you fulfill the desires of my heart right now? It's not through sexual experience, it's only the desire. Remember, those are two different categories. So what happens is we have a sexual desire. We're connected with the Lord. Now, on a soul level, we feel full. We feel content. We feel at rest. And our body is totally at peace. Whether or not we have the urges in our body, we're content. We're okay. We don't need the sexual experience. And this is why the world's way of thinking about sexuality is so harmful, because we're led by the flesh, and then it creates all of this soul and spirit dysfunction in our lives. But when we can learn what this is actually saying is that those people who do that, they don't know God. They don't have deep experiences with the Lord. They're not in his family. They don't know him on a deeply intimate level, especially in the context of sexuality. But for you who know God, which is to say not just a head knowledge, but you have deep experiential approach with the Lord every time you have sexual desire, that's the knowing that is talking about here. So it says, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God, that no one transgress his brother in this matter, because the Lord is an avenger in all these things. What if sexual desire actually taught us to die to self so that we wouldn't wrong a brother? What if our sexual desire actually taught us that life isn't all about us and it's not all about our pleasure? What if it taught us that life is actually about finding contentment in the Lord, and more importantly, glorifying the Lord in all that we do, so that instead of consuming content where somebody's high on drugs, maybe they've been manipulated to be there, at the very least, even if they choose it, it's so damaging and detrimental to their soul. We're not taking advantage of these people by consuming this content. We're not taking advantage of somebody by committing sexual immorality with them. Instead of that, we're dying to ourselves and we're blessing people. We're living with love and a broken heart towards those who are engaging in immorality. We're growing in love for the Father because we have a fear of God, knowing that, man, he is an avenger in all things, and he doesn't want us to take advantage of his children. What if the purpose of sexual desire was to teach you to die to self, to glorify God, and to bless other people, whether it's through sexual experience or not? The reason why God, in his grace and mercy and love for us as a good father, gives us sexual desires before we ever get married and can have godly sexual experiences is because it's not even about sexual experiences. It's about a deep connection with the Lord that changes us from the inside out so that we can live holy and honorable lives for the Lord. How have you seen God go to work in your life in the area of your sexuality to change you, to transform you, and to make you more like Jesus? And if you want more of this content, make sure you subscribe to find Jesus at the center of your sexuality.